So you're ready to really level up your English listening?
Yeah.
You've probably tried some of the usual stuff, right? Like,
Yeah.
maybe some vocab drills, slowed down audio, subtitles, that kind of thing.
Yeah, a lot of learners I've worked with, they sort of get stuck in this loop, right? They get bits and pieces, but it's like
Yeah.
they're not getting that full picture.
Yeah, like you've got all the pieces of the puzzle,
Right.
but you don't know how to put it together.
Exactly.
So how do we start to make those connections? Where do we even begin?
Well, I think a good place to start is with something called targeted listening, right?
Oh, okay.
So instead of just kind of listening to any English you can find, you really want to think about your interests. What are you into?
Yeah.
Like, do you love true crime? Are you into history? Maybe science fiction?
Right.
And then find podcasts or audiobooks that are at your level.
Okay.
Like, beginner level, but in those genres.
Gotcha.
So, for example, if you're really fascinated by history, there's this great podcast, I think it's called Stories from the Past, that's specifically designed for English language learners.
Oh, that's so smart. Tapping into something that you're already interested in, right?
Exactly.
It reminds me of when I was learning Spanish. I listened to every podcast I could find about art history because I love it, and it just
That's great.
makes it fun, right? It doesn't feel like work.
Yeah, definitely.
But what about resources that aren't made for, language learners specifically? Like I've heard subtitles can be helpful, but I also worry about like becoming too reliant on them.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Subtitles can be a really great stepping stone, especially when you're just starting out.
Okay.
They really give you that visual support
Yeah.
to connect the spoken word to the written form, right? But the key is using them strategically.
Okay.
I suggest a two-step approach. So first, watch or listen with subtitles on, right? Get a feel for the content.
Okay.
See if there are any words or phrases that you're like, what is that?
Totally.
And then turn off those subtitles and see how much you can understand just based on what you've already absorbed.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, like having training wheels on a bike.
Exactly.
And then you can take them off as you go, right?
Exactly.
But, sometimes even with clear audio and subtitles, I struggle with, like, real-life conversations.
Yeah.
It just feels like the pace is so much faster and,
Yeah.
the accents are thicker and there's just so much going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Going from scripted audio to like a real conversation can be a big jump.
It is.
Like all those things we've been talking about come together.
Right.
Like vocab, grammar,
Yeah.
pronunciation,
Yeah.
and listening comprehension.
Yep.
All those things kind of come together in this like dynamic way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where something called shadowing can come in.
Okay.
Have you ever tried shadowing?
I've heard of it, but I haven't actually tried it, I don't think.
Right.
Like, it sounds a little intimidating. Like, am I supposed to be, like, a perfect mimic of whoever's speaking?
Not at all. No, it's more about just really actively engaging with the audio
Okay.
by trying to repeat what you hear.
Uh-huh.
You're not going for perfection.
Okay.
You're focusing on matching the speaker's rhythm, the intonation, how they pronounce things as
Yeah.
best you can.
Okay.
It's almost like a workout
Yeah.
for your ears and your tongue.
Right. So it's like I'm training my brain to recognize
Exactly.
those sounds.
Yeah, those sounds, those patterns.
Okay. So how does that actually help with understanding conversations, though?
Well, the cool thing about shadowing is that it forces you to pay attention to all those subtle things
Okay.
in spoken English, right?
Mm.
Like the pauses, the stresses, the way that words connect to each other.
Right.
And by mimicking those things, you're basically training your brain
Okay.
to process them better when you hear them in real life.
Gotcha.
So it's like you're building those neural pathways, right?
Yeah.
That make understanding natural speech more intuitive.
It's like second nature almost.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
Yeah. And it's not just, speed or pronunciation.
Yeah.
Accents play a big role, too,
Yeah.
in how we understand, English.
Definitely.
You were saying that you have trouble with thicker accents.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty common challenge,
Yeah.
especially if you're mostly used to hearing, like,
Yeah.
one standard accent.
Yeah, for sure. I remember the first time I traveled to Scotland,
Oh, wow.
I was so lost. I was like,
Yeah.
is this even English?
Right. It's almost like a whole other dialect.
Yeah.
But, the good news is you can train your ear
Okay.
to understand all these different variations. It's like,
Uh-huh.
think about music, right?
Okay.
You might not love heavy metal at first,
Right.
but if you listen to more of it,
Yeah.
you start to pick up on, like, the melodies, the artistry.
Yeah, okay. I like that.
So it's like the same with accents.
So how do we get better at understanding different accents?
Well, the more you immerse yourself
Okay.
in, all these different accents,
Yeah.
the more your brain gets used to them.
Right. Okay.
So, something like TED Talks is great because you have people from all over the world.
Yeah, with all kinds of accents.
Right. And then you can also try podcasts or radio from different, English-speaking countries.
Oh, okay.
Like the BBC World Service, they have like a huge range of accents.
Cool. So it's just about exposing yourself to as much as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of funny, though, because I've always been nervous to, try to talk to a native speaker, especially if they have a strong accent.
Yeah, I get it.
I feel like I'm just going to embarrass myself.
I understand that feeling, but,
Gotcha.
most native speakers are actually really patient
Okay.
and understanding, especially with language learners. They've probably been there themselves
Right. Yeah, that's true.
trying to learn a new language.
Yeah. Okay, well, that makes me feel a little better.
Yeah.
But where do I even find these
Exactly.
patient native speakers to talk to?
So there's a bunch of platforms online that connect language learners with native speakers
Okay.
to practice.
Cool.
One that I really like is called Hello Talk.
Okay.
It's almost like it's like a social media platform just for language learning.
Gotcha.
You make a profile, you connect with people,
Yeah.
maybe who have similar interests to you,
That's awesome.
and you can practice speaking and listening in a safe environment.
That's cool. So it's like having a conversation partner,
Exactly.
but without the pressure?
Yeah, exactly. No pressure.
Okay, I like it. But what about the more technical side of listening?
Right.
Like understanding idioms or slang?
Yes.
I always get tripped up on those.
Yeah, idioms and slang, they're like the spices of the language. They can be really hard,
They are?
but they're also,
Yeah.
really fun to learn.
Yeah.
I think the key is to just, approach them with curiosity and
Okay.
don't take it too seriously. Have fun with it.
Okay, so instead of getting frustrated when I hear an idiom,
Yeah.
I should just try to figure out what it means from context.
Yeah. Try to guess.
Or, ask somebody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What does that mean?
Yeah. And don't be afraid to write it down
Oh, okay.
and then try to use it yourself.
Okay.
The more you practice, the more natural it'll become.
It's like anything, right? The more you practice,
Exactly.
the better you get.
Yeah. Practice makes perfect.
This makes me realize, we get so focused on grammar and vocab that sometimes we forget to just have fun.
I know. It's so important
Right.
to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Language learning should be fun.
Speaking of fun, what are some ways to make sure we have more of those,
Yeah.
aha moments when we're listening?
Right.
Is there anything we can do
Yeah.
besides just, listening and practicing?
Yeah. There's this technique called active listening.
Okay.
And, it's not just about passively hearing the words.
Okay.
It's about engaging with what you're hearing.
Okay. So I'm paying attention to not just what they're saying,
Right.
but how they're saying it.
Exactly. Like their tone of voice,
Yeah.
body language, the whole context of the conversation.
Okay.
That can help you pick up on subtle cues and really,
Yeah.
understand what they're trying to say.
Okay. So it's like I'm a detective looking for clues.
Yes, exactly. I love that.
Right. To figure out the meaning.
Yeah. You're sharpening your observation skills
Okay.
and learning to read between the lines.
I like that. But what about when I'm totally lost?
Yeah.
I'm missing every other word. How do I deal with that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, don't get discouraged.
Okay.
That's totally normal. Especially, when you're listening to something fast or complicated. One thing that can help is to break down the listening task
Okay.
into smaller chunks.
Gotcha.
So instead of trying to understand everything all at once,
Right.
just focus on the main idea or, some key words and phrases.
Okay. So it's like taking a big puzzle
Yeah,
and breaking it up
Exactly.
into smaller pieces. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And remember, it's totally fine to ask for clarification.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah.
Or could you explain what you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Most people are happy to help.
Okay. It's just sometimes I get nervous
I get it.
and I forget to ask,
Yeah,
but it's okay to ask for help.
it's all part of the learning process.
Yeah, for sure.
And speaking of learning,
Yeah.
repetition can be really helpful.
So listening to the same thing multiple times,
Exactly.
I have to admit that can get a little boring.
I know. But
Yeah.
think about it this way. Each time you listen,
Mm-hmm.
your brain gets more and more familiar with the sounds,
Okay.
the vocabulary, the structure.
Okay.
It's like looking at a painting.
Okay.
The more you look at it, the more details you see.
I like that.
Yeah.
So instead of thinking of repetition as boring,
Right.
it's like a chance to learn more.
Exactly. Exactly. The
Oh.
chance to go deeper.
But what about when I'm like really short on time?
Right.
Is there anything like quick and easy I can do?
Yeah, even a few minutes can make a difference.
Okay.
Think about your daily routine.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any times where you could, fit in some English?
Well, I usually listen to music when I cook dinner.
Perfect. You could switch to an English podcast
Oh, okay.
or an audiobook.
Gotcha.
Or how about when you're getting ready in the morning?
Yeah.
And listen to a news bulletin in English.
Right. Okay. So find little pockets of time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Good.
Find those little moments.
This has been so helpful. Seriously.
I'm good. I'm
I
glad.
feel like we've covered so much.
We have.
But before we, wrap up this part,
Yeah.
I wanted to get your thoughts on community. I know we mentioned Hello Talk,
Right.
but I want to learn more about the benefits of connecting with,
Yeah.
other learners or native speakers.
That's a great question. Sometimes language learning can feel
Yeah.
kind of lonely, especially if you're studying by yourself.
Oh, totally.
But, connecting with others who are doing the same thing
Mhm.
can be super motivating.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I get stuck in my own little bubble,
Yeah.
and it's easy to get discouraged.
Right. Exactly.
But how does being part of a community actually help with, like, my listening skills?
Well, when you're talking to other learners or native speakers,
Mm-hmm.
you're always hearing new vocabulary,
Yeah.
different accents, different speaking styles. It's like
Yeah.
having,
Yeah.
your own little English-speaking world right there.
Right. Like, I'm creating my own little language lab
Exactly.
where I can practice
Yeah.
and not worry about making mistakes.
Right, exactly. And it's not just about, the practical stuff. There's also the emotional support.
That's huge.
Yeah, you can share your struggles,
Mhm.
celebrate successes,
Yeah.
keep each other motivated.
So it's like finding your people, your tribe.
Exactly. Exactly.
And that can make all the difference.
Yeah, it's like you're not alone.
Exactly.
It's been so interesting. I'm like ready to go find my English learning community right now.
Yeah. Awesome.
But before we wrap up this segment,
Yeah.
I want to circle back to something we talked about before.
Okay.
The importance of having fun.
Yes. Yes. So important.
Right.
Don't forget to have fun.
It shouldn't feel like a chore.
Exactly. It should be an adventure.
Right, like an adventure, yeah.
A way to connect with the world.
I love that.
It's a journey of discovery.
Yeah, it's easy to get bogged down in all the grammar rules and stuff.
The technicalities.
Yeah, but we got to remember to have fun.
Have fun. Be curious.
Yeah, be playful.
Playful. Exactly. Embrace the challenges.
Embrace those challenges. Celebrate those little wins.
Yeah. Celebrate the win.
Enjoy the ride.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've been talking about how to take our listening skills to the next level.
Yeah.
And we've covered so much, like targeted listening,
Right.
active listening, shadowing,
Yeah.
embracing different accents, finding your community.
It's a lot, yeah.
Right. But before we get to our final thoughts for today,
Okay.
I just want to recap the key takeaways for our listeners.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's
Yeah.
summarize all this good stuff.
Yeah. So for our listener who's trying to, really improve their English listening,
Mhm.
what are the most important things to remember?
Well, I think the first thing is, remember that listening is a skill,
Mm-hmm.
and you can develop it with practice and the right strategies.
Yeah, it's a skill like any other skill.
Exactly.
Like, you're not going to be perfect overnight.
No, it takes time.
It's a journey, not a destination.
It's all about progress.
Exactly.
Not perfection.
Okay, so what are some of those
Mm.
specific things we can do to practice?
Well, first, remember targeted listening.
Okay, yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah, choose audio that,
Yeah,
really aligns with your interests and your goals.
I gotta be interesting.
Exactly, whether it's podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
audiobooks, YouTube videos.
Yeah,
Make sure it's something you enjoy.
makes sense. It's easier to stay motivated.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, what else?
Then embrace active listening.
Okay.
Yes, so, don't just passively listen.
Yeah.
Engage with the content.
Pay attention to the tone, the body language, the context.
Exactly, all those things.
Okay.
That'll help you,
Yeah.
really understand what's going on.
Be a more aware listener.
Exactly. And then let's talk about shadowing.
Oh.
Yeah? So remember, you're mimicking
Yeah.
the rhythm, intonation, pronunciation.
Like being the speaker's echo.
Exactly. And I know it can feel a little awkward.
Yeah.
But it's a really good way to,
Mhm.
train your brain.
Yeah, I like that. Like giving your listening muscles
Exactly, a workout.
a workout.
And speaking of workouts,
Yeah.
repetition is key.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to listen to things multiple times.
More than once.
Each time you listen,
Yeah.
you'll pick up on something new.
Yeah. I like that. So we're embracing repetition
Embrace the repetition.
instead of being like,
Yeah.
this is so boring.
Yeah, don't think of it as a chore.
Yeah.
Think of it as an opportunity
Okay.
to learn more.
I like that.
And finally, don't forget about community.
Yeah.
Connect with other learners.
Jabby?
Find a language partner. Join a forum online.
Yeah.
Sharing your experiences, practicing your listening.
Supporting each other.
Yeah, supporting each other could really make a big difference.
It's like creating this supportive network
It's
where we can all learn.
Exactly. Remember, language learning. It's a journey best shared.
I love that. Okay. Those are some really great takeaways.
Yeah, I hope so.
I feel like way more confident to tackle those listening challenges.
Okay.
But before we move on to our final thoughts,
Okay.
I want to talk about one more thing.
Yeah.
The fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
Like so many learners, including myself, get nervous about not sounding perfect or not understanding everything.
Yeah. That's a really common feeling.
It is.
And it's important to remember that making mistakes, it's part of the learning process.
It is.
Embrace it.
Yeah, instead of seeing it as a failure,
Exactly.
like the stepping stone.
It's a stepping stone.
So fluency.
Exactly. And, native speakers make mistakes too.
They do.
It's part of being human.
It is. It's true. So we should just focus on, making progress and
progress, not perfection.
Yeah, and celebrating the wins.
Celebrating the wins, exactly.
Okay, so we're not striving for this unattainable perfection.
Yeah.
We're just
enjoying the journey.
Enjoying the ride.
Enjoying the ride.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, this has been such a good conversation.
I'm glad you think so.
I feel so much more confident and motivated to,
Good.
Let's keep going with my listening.
Keep going. Yeah.
But before we wrap up
this
deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a question to think about.
Okay, good idea.
So think about all the things we talked about today, like targeted listening, active listening, shadowing.
Right.
Embracing those accents, finding your community.
Yeah.
What really stood out to you? What are you most excited to, try to improve?
Yeah, that's a great question to think about.
Yeah.
Because, figuring out what you're excited about is going to help you stay motivated.
Totally.
And make progress, right? Remember, it's not a race, it's a marathon. And you can set the pace.
And every step you take is a win, right?
Absolutely. Every word you understand.
Yeah.
Every time you, push yourself to speak.
Yeah.
That's a victory. You should celebrate it.
Celebrate those wins.
Every aha moment.
Yeah.
Every time you have a conversation and you get through it,
Yeah.
Or even just, when you find yourself humming along to an English song.
Yeah.
Those are all signs that you're on the right track.
I love that. And, maybe one day you'll find yourself in a conversation where you're not even thinking about the language anymore.
Right.
You're just enjoying the moment.
Exactly. You're just present.
Yeah. And connecting with the person.
Yeah. Language becomes that bridge.
I love that. It's been so great talking with you about all this.
It's been fun. Yeah.
I'm already thinking about our next deep dive.
Oh, yeah. What are you thinking?
Maybe we can talk about some fun ways to, learn new vocabulary.
Yeah.
Or even tackle grammar.
Ooh, grammar, the big one.
Yeah, the grammar beast.
I'm always up for a challenge.
Okay, sounds good.
The world of language learning, it's an adventure.
It is.
So until next time, keep listening, keep practicing.
Yeah.
And, most importantly, keep having fun.
Yes, have fun and enjoy those aha moments.
Exactly.
Happy listening, everyone.
All right. Let's dive into these sources you shared on English listening practice for beginners. I can definitely see why you picked this topic. It's so interesting how we tend to concentrate so much on grammar and vocabulary when we learn a language, but then listening, kind of gets pushed aside.
It really does. It's like trying to bake a cake but forgetting the flour.
Yeah.
You can have all the sugar and frosting in the world, but without that key ingredient, the cake is just going to fall apart. And these sources really hit home on how important having good listening skills is for being able to truly understand and use English in the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some seriously practical tips in these sources to, build up those listening skills. One thing that really stood out to me was this idea of starting slow, but not just any slow content. What I thought was interesting was how the sources specifically recommended stuff like children's stories, and not just any children's stories. They actually mentioned Peppa Pig and the Oxford Bookworms Library as good examples, because those have that clear pronunciation and simple sentences.
That's a really good point. And what makes these particular recommendations so effective is that they uh, really think about how much our brains can handle at once when we're listening. So when the language is really straightforward and repetitive, it lets beginners like really focus on picking out the sounds and recognizing patterns without feeling totally lost. It's almost like getting your ears used to the language in a way that's um, comfortable and safe.
That makes total sense. Another thing that I thought was really cool was the idea of using subtitles. Actually, I used to do that all the time when I was learning French. I'd watch British comedies with the subtitles on, and like it
Yeah.
really helped me pick up on those different accents and funny phrases.
Yeah, I can see how that would work. The sources talk about how subtitles kind of create this bridge between what you're seeing and what you're hearing. It's almost like you have a cheat sheet while you're trying to figure out a puzzle. You can see the words written down, and at the same time, you're hearing them spoken aloud. So it strengthens that connection between like the written form of the word and how it actually sounds.
Yeah. And they even give some good strategies for using subtitles effectively.
Yeah.
Like you can start with them on just to get a feel for the content, but then as you get more comfortable, you can challenge yourself by switching them off for like short bursts. That way you
Yeah.
can sort of test how much you're understanding. It's kind of like taking the training wheels off your bike a little at a time.
Exactly. It's like finding the right balance between having some support but also pushing yourself. So, moving on from subtitles, one aspect of listening practice that often gets forgotten is everyday conversations. It might not seem like much, but even those short exchanges you have at the coffee shop, the grocery store, or even just like overhearing people talking around you, those can be super useful.
It's so true. The sources really emphasize tuning into those real-life scenarios. Like,
Hmm.
they recommend websites like elo.org and BBC Learning English because they've got tons of examples of these everyday conversations. Have you ever used those websites before?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think they're fantastic resources. What I really like about them is that they provide, transcripts and interactive exercises along with the audio, which can be like super helpful for beginners, especially it's almost like having your own little language lab right there on your computer or phone.
Yeah, that's so cool. And it's not just about learning new vocabulary, right? It's about really getting a feel for that natural rhythm and flow of conversation, picking up on all the idioms and slang and like all those subtle little things that textbooks just don't cover.
Exactly. You put it perfectly. It's about getting a sense of how the language is actually used in like genuine situations.
Yeah.
Now, one technique that comes up a lot in these sources and one that I totally swear by is repetition. When I was learning Spanish, I would listen to the same podcast episode like over and over again. And every time I did, I'd catch something new that I'd missed before.
That's wild. Like our brains are so amazing. What's interesting is how the sources actually explain the science behind it. They say repetition strengthens the connections in our brains, making those links between sounds and meaning stronger. It's like building up muscle memory, but for language.
It's a great analogy. And if you want to take it up a notch, there's this technique called shadowing. It's basically where you repeat along with the speaker in real time. It might feel a little strange at first, but it works wonders for improving pronunciation and fluency. Trust me.
Oh, I've heard about that. It's kind of like mimicking a dance routine. You're not just watching the steps, you're actively trying to do them yourself, which really helps you get that rhythm and flow down. And the sources actually mention how like mimicking sounds strengthens those neural connections in your brain that are responsible for pronunciation and comprehension.
It's amazing how these simple techniques can have such a big impact, huh? Now, this is where things get really interesting.
Ooh, I love when you say that. What's coming next?
Yeah. Okay, so these sources are all about listening globally, not just locally. It means exposing yourself to as many different English accents as you can.
Ah, that makes perfect sense. It's like realizing there's a whole world of food beyond your favorite local restaurant. Got to try all the flavors.
Exactly. And the sources suggest resources like TED Talks and BBC Radio are great for this. They've got a huge variety of accents, from American to British to Australian, and everything in between.
Wow. It's like having a sonic passport to all the different corners of the English-speaking world.
Yeah.
It helps you understand all the different ways people speak, which is super helpful. I remember feeling so lost the first time I heard a thick Scottish accent. I was like, what language is this?
I can imagine. But think about it like this.
Hmm.
Each accent is like a different dialect within the same language, and the more you listen to, the more your ear gets used to those differences, and then those unfamiliar sounds become less intimidating. It's so true. It makes you a more well-rounded listener, like able to understand all the different ways English is spoken around the world. This is all so fascinating. I feel like I'm already getting better at listening just from talking about it.
That's awesome. Now let's switch gears a bit and explore another really important aspect of listening practice, which is interactive activities. Yeah, interactive activities can really bring the fun back into learning, It's one thing to just sit there and listen passively, but when you're actively doing something, it really helps you remember what you're learning.
Oh, for sure. I'm all about finding ways to make learning more enjoyable. And the sources mention a few popular apps like Duolingo and ESL Lab. They have these interactive exercises and quizzes that make it feel more like a game. I've actually tried Duolingo myself, and I love how they use those game-like elements to keep you, coming back for more. It's a smart strategy because it kind of shifts how you think about learning. Instead of seeing it as a chore, it becomes more like a challenge. You're not just passively taking in information, you're like actively recalling details and trying to apply what you've learned in real time. Plus, you get instant feedback so you know right away what you need to work on.
It's almost like having a little language tutor right there in your pocket.
Yeah.
And speaking of personalized learning, the sources also talk about the importance of finding your tribe. Like connecting with other people who are learning English.
Yeah.
It reminded me of when I was learning Italian and I joined this conversation group. It made such a huge difference just being able to practice with other people.
Yeah. It's incredible how much more you can learn when you're interacting with others. These groups create this safe space where you can practice your listening without worrying about making mistakes. They mention platforms like HelloTalk, which connects you with other learners and even native speakers from all over the world.
That's so cool. It's like having a whole network of language buddies to practice with. And it's not just about practicing listening either. It's about connecting with people who share your passion for languages.
Yeah.
Like you get to exchange cultural insights and maybe even make some new friends along the way.
Absolutely. It adds this whole other layer to the learning experience. It becomes less about studying alone and more like a collaborative journey. So, as we've been going through these sources, I'm curious, is there anything that's really stood out to you, like something that was particularly insightful or maybe even something that surprised you?
One thing that really resonated with me was the emphasis on consistency. It's not about like cramming a bunch of information all at once or only practicing every now and then. It's about making listening practice a regular part of your daily routine, even if it's just for like 15 minutes a day. The sources compare it to like building any other skill. Like if you want to learn to play an instrument or get good at a sport, you have to practice consistently, right? And it's the same with language learning. Even small, consistent effort over time leads to big improvements.
It's like that saying, slow and steady wins the race, right? And the great thing about listening practice is that you can fit it into your day so easily. You can listen to a podcast on your commute, watch a quick video during your lunch break, or even just pay attention to the conversations happening around you.
Those little moments of mindful listening can really make a difference. And speaking of mindfulness, I was intrigued by how the sources touched on the idea that mindfulness practices like meditation could actually help improve your listening skills. It makes sense when you think about it. Meditation is all about training your attention and focusing on the present moment, right? And that's essential for good listening.
It's a fascinating connection. Imagine if you could train your mind to be more aware of those subtle changes in sound, intonation, and rhythm. It would be like you're sharpening your ears, helping you hear the language with more clarity and depth.
I love that analogy. It's amazing how these ancient practices can actually complement modern learning techniques.
Mm.
So before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I wanted to get your take on something. With all these amazing techniques and resources we've discussed, where do you think a beginner should start? What's the most effective first step on this journey to becoming a great listener?
That's a great question. I think the most important thing is to be honest with yourself about your current level and what you're comfortable with. If you're brand new to English, starting with something simple and clear, like those children's stories we talked about earlier, is a great foundation. It's kind of like learning your ABCs before you try to write a novel.
That makes sense. And then as you get more comfortable, you can slowly start challenging yourself with things like subtitled videos or real-life conversations.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between being challenged and being overwhelmed. You want to push yourself just enough to stay engaged without getting frustrated. And I think it's also important to remember that there's no magic formula, everyone learns differently. So experiment with different techniques, try out different resources and see what clicks for you.
It's about making the learning journey your own, and most importantly, having fun along the way.
Hmm.
And I think that's a wonderful message to keep in mind as we wrap up this part of our exploration of English listening practice.
Absolutely. It's all about embracing the process, celebrating those aha moments, and remembering that every step you take, no matter how small, gets you closer to your goal. Now, are you ready to dive into the final part of our deep dive?
Oh yeah, let's do it. I can't wait to see what other gems these sources have in store for us. Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into these really insightful sources on English listening practice, what are some of the final takeaways you'd want to leave our listeners with?
As we've been talking, one thing that's really hit me is how important it is to make the whole learning experience fun. These sources really stress that, you've got to find ways to make it enjoyable, not a chore.
Yeah, it's so true. Who wants to force themselves to do something they don't enjoy? It's like the difference between eating a plate of plain broccoli versus, having a delicious meal. When you enjoy it, it just becomes so much easier and more natural.
Exactly. And when you find those ways to make it fun, it keeps you motivated. You're more likely to stick with it, even when it gets challenging. It's all about building a positive relationship with the language, one that's based on curiosity and a real desire to connect.
That's a great way to put it. And remember, everyone out there listening, you're not alone in this. We're here to support you every step of the way. We'll keep sharing more tips and resources on our website and social media.
Definitely. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or if you're struggling with something. We're here to help. Think of us as your partners in this whole language learning adventure.
I love that. Now, before we say goodbye, I wanted to leave you with one final thought, something to kind of ponder as you keep working on those listening skills. We've talked about all these different techniques, active listening strategies, but I'm wondering, could cultivating a sense of inner peace, maybe through something like meditation, actually help you become a better listener?
Ooh, that's a really interesting question. There's actually been a lot of research lately that suggests that mindfulness and meditation can help improve your attention span, clear your mind, and boost those cognitive functions. So it makes sense that those benefits could carry over to language learning as well.
Right. Imagine if you could train your mind to be more present, more attuned to those subtle shifts in pronunciation and tone of voice. It would be like fine-tuning your ear so you can really hear the music of the language.
That's such a beautiful way to think about it. It really highlights how interconnected our mental and emotional states are to our ability to learn and grow. It's definitely something I'm going to explore more deeply myself.
That's awesome. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into English listening practice. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring.
Remember, everyone, becoming fluent in a language takes time. So enjoy the process, celebrate all those little victories, and never stop exploring the amazing world of the English language.
Keep listening, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.